Hello everyone, this is Shannon from That's So Po, and today I'm doing week 45 of my 2021 reads. This week I read 3 books, which were all great. I DNF'd 2 books that I'd been working on for a while and finally gave up on, and I was part of a collaboration video, which I'll tell you about at the end. Timestamps and content warnings are in the description box below. The first book that I finished this week was Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner. This is a book that I'd heard so many people talking about and really raving about, so I'd put a hold on it, and it had come in while I was quite busy with my Hugo reading, and so I finally picked it up only a few days before it was due at the library. And the reason I picked it up was because coincidentally, my good friend Cynthia at BookWhimsy, who I've linked below, posted on Goodreads that she had started reading this, and I asked her, do you want to buddy read this? Because I really need a push to actually read this before it's due. And so we just had an impromptu buddy read, and it was so wonderful. If you guys aren't already subscribed to Cynthia, you really should go check her out. I feel like if you like my channel, you're gonna love her channel. We have such an overlap in our tastes, but also she has really eclectic interests and plenty of things that are different from what I read. She's just such a fascinating person, and I loved buddy reading this with her. So the basic idea of this book is that it is Michelle Zauner's memoir, but really focused on a particular period in her life and a particular relationship. So her mother passed away from cancer when she was in her mid-20s, and this is written maybe in her late 20s. And it's talking about her relationship with her mother and about losing her mother and about really that grief and trauma, and about not really fully knowing her mother as a person. I think that it's very hard when you're a kid to fully understand your parent, and if you don't have that opportunity as an adult to form a new relationship with them, sometimes they remain a mystery. So this book is just going through that, and it has these chapters. Some of the chapters are just amazingly written, especially the title chapter, Crying in H Mart, which is an essay that I think maybe she had written and published elsewhere before it became part of this memoir. She has this beauty of talking about her grief, and especially about her connection to food and how that connected to her mom, especially because her mom was from Korea and her dad is American, and she grew up in the US, but she doesn't have a very strong connection to her Korean heritage without her mom there. And food is one of the few areas where, one, she formed a deep relationship with her mom, but 2, that connects her to her heritage. So there were so many interesting things in this, just about that grief and about that connection. I did find, though, that a lot of the middle chapters were very heavy on the trauma and the real intense emotions that Michelle Zauner went through. I think because this book was written only a couple of years after her mother passed, she's still working through things, and this book feels almost like therapy for her, almost like her working through a lot of the anger and a lot of the sadness and all of these emotions. So it's very intense emotionally. She also has a very difficult relationship with her dad, and so there's so much anger towards him in this, and just a lot of generational trauma that has passed through the family. Definitely big content warnings for a lot of that stuff. I'll have all that down below for you to check out. But it was a bit intense for me. I really liked especially like that first essay and some of the later essays where there's a bit more reflection there. That really spoke to me. Whereas the intensity of the emotions was a little bit much, although Cynthia loved that. So I think that's really a personal taste thing. For me, I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read The Anthropocene Reviewed by John Green. This is another sort of memoir, but it's actually a combination of essays talking about various things in the world, and especially reflecting on humanity's impact on them, mixed with memoir and sort of introspection about John Green's own connection to each of these things. I ended up loving this book, and I'm gonna have a review up for it later this week, but it was a little bit of a surprise to me because I'm not somebody who reads John Green's work. Obviously I've heard of him, and Sush and I, my husband and I, have watched quite a few crash course courses, but not the ones that John Green is in, because I find him a little bit too energetic and it's just tiring for me. So I was not planning to pick this collection up, except I started hearing so many good reviews about it, and then Sush read it and he loved it. So I thought, let me give this a try, and then I just fell in love with it. This is one of my favorite books that I've read this year. It had me in tears because I was just so moved by all of the different essays. John Green is incredibly vulnerable in the way that he writes about his experiences, especially with anxiety and depression and illness and feelings of hopelessness, but also with a lot of reflection. All of these are filled with so much reflection and thought and introspection. It's beautifully written. The essays are just these really concise, beautiful pieces about an idea and thinking about what that means for humanity, what that means for the world, and what that means for him. And I absolutely loved this. So if you're somebody who hasn't picked it up because you're not really somebody who wants to read John Green's typical things, I think maybe consider giving this a try. Definitely check out my review later this week to see if it sounds a little bit like what you're interested in, but I loved this. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Another book I finished that I was surprised by just how much I loved it was The Craft of Love by E. Ottoman. This is a historical romance novella that I heard about because Kazen at Always Doing, who I will link below, mentioned on Goodreads that she'd finished it and it was so sweet. And Kazen is somebody who I always pay attention to whatever she recommends because she's got great taste. Also, if you are not subscribed to Kazen, please do check her out. Again, there's a lot of overlap in her taste and my taste, and she reads so many great things. I especially love her nonfiction recommendations and her romance recommendations. They're so good. I love listening to her too. So she had recommended this book just in terms of talking about it on Goodreads, and I thought, what is this? And I looked at it and I loved the description. So this is a book set in the 1830s in New York, and it follows a trans man who is a silversmith, and he commissions a quilt maker to make a quilt out of some old embroidered dresses that his mother had made, as just kind of a way of processing some of his emotions about that. And they strike up just this great companionship, this great relationship, as in return for her making this quilt for him, he makes her a teapot. And it's just filled with such gentle, sweet romance. It's all about their respect for each other and their kindness and their connection. This is not at all a steamy romance, and it's not at all angsty, but it has a lot of really interesting commentary on the sort of societal issues of the time. E. Ottoman is actually a historian, and so I really felt the history in this. I love historical romances that have a strong element of history, and in this we have great discussions about things like the textile industry and about different issues of the way that craftspeople are treated, and especially women who are in the crafts and all of these sorts of things. So it was just such a fascinating book. I loved the way that the characters interacted and just how gentle and beautiful the story was. This was such a joy to read. And I even got to discuss it with Kazen and some other people as part of a little mini book club that happened to be happening the day after I read it that Kazen invited me to. So it was just so sweet. Really definitely recommend this if you like gentle historical romances. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars, and I'm for sure going to be looking into more of Ottoman's works. And then I did DNF a couple of things, starting with Not George Washington by P.G. Wodehouse. So Sush, my husband, has been reading me P.G. Wodehouse stories as bedtime stories for a while now. We're trying to work through all of his stories, which is quite a big back catalog. And this one, unlike most of his other works, just really didn't work for us. So we actually ended up getting through 41% of this, but we probably should have even DNF'd it earlier. Unlike most of Wodehouse's works, works, this one just didn't have a lot of the absurdity and sort of comedy of errors and just hilarity that his works have. It was just a little bit less nice, if that makes any sense, especially because one of the main characters that we follow is just not a nice guy. He basically wants to become a writer and he moves to London, and he's trying to make it as a writer in particular because there's a girl kind of that he had met who he wants to marry, but he needs to have like an actual career and be making money. But then as soon as he starts making money, he's like, never mind, I don't really want to marry that girl anyway. And it's just, we were not into it. So we DNF'd this one. Glad that we DNF'd it. Kind of briefly looked at Goodreads and some other people were like, I love Wodehouse, but what is this? So if you like Wodehouse, I don't recommend bothering with this one. And if you haven't read any Wodehouse, there are so many other great things to try. Not this one. And then the other book that I DNF'd, I was a bit sad to DNF, which was Witch Hat Atelier Volume 3 by Kamome Shirahama, translated by Stephen Kohler. So I was really hoping to love this series. I really enjoyed the first volume. The second volume was okay, and I was hoping that the third volume would just really get better and really get me hooked, and instead I just struggled. I picked this book up 5 times and I got through 62% of the manga, and manga usually reads incredibly fast for me. So to just struggle with this so much, I finally realized I had to stop because I just couldn't get into it. Like the previous 2 volumes, the artwork in this is amazing, like really gorgeous artwork, and the magic in this world where basically you have witches who can draw out spells on paper is really, really cool. But I just wasn't enjoying the storyline at all. There's a lot of mystery that for me is just a little bit overly dramatic. And then the times when we're not dealing with that mystery, we're dealing with this group of little girls who are in this magic atelier kind of learning to be witches, and I found their interactions just overly cutesy, you know, kind of like friendship is great, yay, like it was just a little bit too cutesy for me. So it kind of vacillated between cutesy and dramatic, and neither one of those was working for me. So unfortunately, even though I know so many other people who love this series, this one just, I guess, isn't for me. I was very sad because I really do love the artwork and the premise of it, but oh well. So in addition to the books that I read and DNF'd this week, I did want to tell you about a collaboration video that I did with Kristen at Kristenelle SFF Reader, who I will link below. We had a video where we talked about the related works category for the Hugos this year, and we had such a great discussion. It's actually like a 45-minute video because we had so much to say. The related works category is a really fascinating one in the Hugos this year because I think it represents a lot of the discussions that are happening within the Worldcon community of, do we kind of really glorify some of the old guard ways of thinking about SFF, or do we move towards new, more inclusive ways of having this community? And so just a lot of really interesting ideas. We had a great discussion. So if you're all interested in what's going on in the Hugos or in kind of the SFF genre fandom, definitely check that video out. I linked it below. We had just such a great discussion. It was really, really good. And also just, if you're interested in SFF, you should be following Kristen. She is reading basically all of the new releases and really following the awards and kind of constantly talking about all of these new SFF releases. Very, very good person to follow. Okay, so that is everything for me this week. If you guys have read any of the books that I talked about, or if you have anything you want to chat with me about, just leave me a comment down below.